Next on the news.
Whoever did this leak should be prosecuted and should go to jail for a very long time.
Chaos at the Supreme Court and shock across the nation. A leak, a look into the justices' deliberation in one of the most consequential cases before the court in decades, Roe v. Wade.
Hey, hey, Roe v. Wade is going to go!
Both pro-life and pro-abortion protesters calling for action. Currents News has all the angles of this story covered. Also, Pope Francis reportedly asking President Vladimir Putin for a meeting in Russia. And he lost it 7 decades ago. Now, a Korean War veteran's prized possession is going back to his family. I'm Michelle Powers. Currents News starts right now. Rumors are true. A majority of justices are ready to overturn Roe v. Wade. Chief Justice John Roberts ordering an investigation into the source of that leaked draft opinion. Meanwhile, he reiterated that it in no way represents a final decision by the court. But is it too little, too late? The court's integrity already undermined and protests popping up around the country.
Hey, ho, Roe v. Wade is going to go!
Women in the U.S. could lose their federal right to have abortions by the end of June. Politico obtained this draft of a U.S. Supreme Court opinion. It suggests the justices are poised to overthrow Roe v. Wade this term. Nothing's final yet, but demonstrators on both sides are taking to the streets.
I am incredibly optimistic. It looks like we're going to finally see justice for the unborn in this country, and finally Roe v. Wade will be overturned and recognized as the egregious, disastrous decision that it is.
This is the kind of thing a lot of pro-life activists, particularly in the older generation, didn't think they were going to see in their lifetime. So it's an emotional moment for all of us in the pro-life movement.
Pro-life groups around the country praise the potential decision, but some question the motivation behind the leak, wondering if the court would be manipulated by this action. In a tweet, the president of March for Life, Jeannie Mancini, said this: "We also believe that given the leak, the court should issue a ruling as soon as possible. This leak was meant to corrupt the process. It is heartbreaking that some abortion advocates will stoop to any level to intimidate the court, no matter what the consequences. But if this opinion stands as written, states alone would regulate abortions."
You are not going to change and roll back the time, 50 years to where, women have to ask for permission to make decisions regarding our own bodies. We're not doing that.
President Joe Biden called on Congress to pass legislation to codify abortion rights.
If the rationale of the decision as released were to be sustained, a whole range of rights are in question, a whole range of rights. And the idea we're letting the states make those decisions, localities make those decisions, would be a fundamental shift in what we've done. So it goes far beyond, in my view, if it becomes a law and if what is written is what remains. It goes far beyond the concern of whether or not there is the right to choose. It goes to other basic rights.
Meanwhile, the leak is an unprecedented breach of Supreme Court secrecy and confidentiality. Congress can pass a law reinstating federal abortion rights, but Democrats need more votes to do that, and Republicans don't want to do that, setting the stage for many more nights of protest.
And I'm hoping that protests like this bring some attention to the fact that America doesn't want to overturn Roe v. Wade, that there is support to maintain it.
So this will likely be a rallying cry for the midterm elections.
Excellent.
So how rare is a Supreme Court breach? Very. Part of the reason it's been so leak-proof is that only a handful of people have access to decisions before they're published: the justices themselves and the small group of clerks who work for them. Dennis Baus, the executive director of the New York State Catholic Conference, refused to comment on the leak, but he did tell us this. The leaking of an internal draft opinion of the Supreme Court is an egregious breach of trust and an attack on the integrity of the judicial branch of government. When our highest court cannot operate free of political interference or intimidation, it serves as a stark example that nothing is sacred anymore. While we fervently pray for legal protections of unborn children, we will not dignify the goals of the leaker by commenting on the contents of the draft document. Meanwhile, Students for Life, a group that seeks to, quote, mobilize the pro-life generation, is speaking out, calling the leak an act of desperation.
I think this was an intentional leak to incite chaos and to pressure the justices to change their vote. What we will have in a post-Roe America is a 50-state battle where we will work state by state to make abortion unthinkable and unavailable. And so it really is just the next phase of our work. And in fact, it's really the growth of our work. I mean, this is a momentous responsibility for us.
That goal is in line with United States bishops. Their goal is not only to change abortion law, but to change hearts and minds so that people do not think what is legal is moral and acceptable. If Roe v. Wade does end up being overturned, it will be up to individual states to decide if the procedure is legal. Abortion access will immediately end in 13 states with trigger laws already on the books. Since some anti-abortion lawmakers have long hoped for this day, these states' legislators have already passed laws that would become enforceable immediately or soon after the court overturns the precedent. In addition, there's speculation that as many as 26 states could ban abortion in the days after the anticipated ruling. Meanwhile, the governor of New York says that'll never happen in her state. She tweeted this today: New York will always be a place where abortion rights are protected. Just as the Statue of Liberty lifts her lamp tall in our harbor, New York will never stop fighting for what's right, unafraid and undeterred. Now, the procedure is not uncommon in the United States, but research shows the rate is falling. Americans are having half as many abortions as they were 30 years ago. Yet the latest estimates found that nearly 25% of women will have an abortion in their lifetime. So who is the typical patient? Studies show they are most likely to already be mothers, unmarried, in their late 20s. They are likely to have attended some college but have a low income. According to the Guttmacher Institute, a pro-abortion research organization, New York leads the country in abortions. The last time statistics were obtained was in 2017. Back then, more than 30% of pregnancies ended with the procedure, and there were more than 100,000. Researchers also believe a majority of the abortions performed in the United States occurred during the first trimester. If you or anyone you know is experiencing an unplanned pregnancy and wants to keep their baby, there are places to turn to. One of them, the Bridge to Life in College Point, Queens, is one of those spots, offering services free of charge. They provide pregnancy tests, options for counseling, and ultrasound referrals. They also provide pregnancy and parenting support and material assistance. If you would like their help, just call 718-463-1810. Since the war in Ukraine began, Pope Francis has been calling for peace, but he's been doing so without publicly calling Putin by name. That's not what he's doing behind closed doors, though. According to an interview given by the Holy Father to an Italian newspaper, Francis has reached out to the Russian president and requested a meeting with him in Moscow. Justin McClellan has the story.
Pope Francis asked to travel to Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin to try to stop the war. But so far, he says he has received no response. Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera published an interview with the Pope in which he says that he fears Putin cannot and does not want to receive him because he believes that the Russian leader will not stop the war at this time. Pope Francis shared that he called the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the first day of the war, but that he will not go to Ukraine without meeting Putin first. He recalled that he has not spoken to the Russian president since last December, when Putin called the Pope for his birthday. He also said that the Hungarian president, Viktor Orbán, assured him that the Russians have a plan in their meeting, and that on May 9th, the anniversary of Nazi Germany's surrender to the Soviet Union at the end of World War II, everything will end.
That was Justin McClellan reporting. Other reports say Putin may actually declare war on May 9th. So far, the Russian president has insisted on calling the conflict a special military operation, avoiding the words war and invasion. Cardinal Timothy Dolan is wrapping up his trip to Ukraine and its bordering countries. His Eminence is flying home on Tuesday, and he is talking about his experiences in the war-torn country. In a radio interview, Cardinal Dolan said this is his biggest takeaway.
When people say, oh, we're glad you're here, but why did you come? Well, because one of the worst results of war and disaster and grave difficulty is this sense of isolation, that people feel they're by themselves, that no one knows what they're going through, that they're all alone. And if we can come from New York, if we can come on behalf of America and the church, there's just a sense of, Jesus said, I'm with you all days. One of the ways he keeps that promise is when people who follow him are there to help.
Cardinal Dolan spent a majority of his trip visiting Catholic agencies and groups that are helping refugees and displaced people on the ground. Meanwhile, in the United States, another humanitarian crisis is brewing. Hundreds of Haitian migrants are at the border with Mexico, hoping to seek asylum in the U.S. The group recently arrived by the border with Laredo, Texas. The diocese there now issuing an appeal for help because their shelters are saturated. They're anxiously looking for donations of personal hygiene items, masks, and medicines. The Mexican city is particularly dangerous. A recent report found that 3/4 of asylum seekers there were victims of kidnapping. All of these mass migrations come as President Biden plans to end Title 42. The Trump-era rule allows Border Patrol agents to quickly return some migrants, mostly to Mexico, without the opportunity to seek asylum. But the commander-in-chief is actually facing mounting pressure from his own party to delay ending the restriction. Casey Hunt has the story.
Hi, everyone. I'm here in Nogales, Arizona, right at the Mexican border.
Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan filming this video almost 3,000 miles from her home state of New Hampshire. She went because the Biden administration is planning to lift a pandemic-era rule that allowed border officials to turn migrants away more than 1.7 million times over the last 2 years. It's set to happen in May, just months before she'll face voters in the midterm elections.
I'm going to keep pushing the administration to develop a really strong strategic plan for how we will secure our borders when Title 42 is lifted.
Right now, about 7,000 migrants are being apprehended every day, the highest in years. And the Department of Homeland Security says that number could double or even triple if Title 42 is lifted.
It is our responsibility to be prepared for different scenarios, and that is what we are doing.
But so far, more than a dozen members of the president's own party have expressed concerns about the administration lifting Title 42. Border State Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona says there isn't a good plan.
There hasn't been enough preparation. There hasn't been a plan put in place.
So the administration has no plan?
Well, they've got a little bit more of a plan as of a couple days ago, but it's still not sufficient. We have this arbitrary date, about 30 days from now, where this policy is supposed to go away, and we'd see that increased numbers, and it hasn't even been decided where the facility would be.
Wow, so you're saying thousands of people would come across the border, and at this point...
There'd be no place to put them. We don't have the basics of how are you going to handle 18,000 individuals a day safely and, in accordance with our ethics and principles. That plan, I haven't seen yet.
Texas Democrat Henry Cuellar putting it bluntly.
Right now, some of the actions by the administration is not helping Democrats.
But President Biden is pressing ahead under intense pressure from immigration activists.
That was Casey Hunt reporting. According to a political poll, 55% of voters are against ending the policy. That breaks down to 88% of Republicans and 27% of Democrats. There's a lot more news headed your way. It's been scarred forever by the war. Now a village in Ukraine is struggling to rebuild in the wake of the Russian attacks, and how a massive recall and supply chain issues are translating to big problems for parents looking for enough baby formula. Evacuees from the besieged city of Mariupol have now reached safety in the southeast part of Ukraine. The people rescued from a devastated steel plant arrived by bus. The International Red Cross confirmed the arrival of the convoy. The organization and UN officials say they are doing whatever is needed to help them. The Russian military is now focusing on the eastern and southern parts of Ukraine. But even though the areas around Kyiv managed to hold off Russian advances, residents there are now struggling to rebuild. Matt Rivers reports on a village scarred by the trauma of war.
The tiny town northwest of Kyiv has been leveled. Russian bombs, rockets, bullets destroyed street after street after street. This was the site of some of the most intense fighting of the war so far. On their drive toward Kyiv, the Russians attacked soldiers and civilians alike here. Ukrainian bunkers alongside ordinary houses, shelled relentlessly to devastating effect.
Boom, 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 fire, fire. It was everywhere. It's a nightmare.
Valentina Fursa has lived in Moshun for years and has never known war until it landed on her doorstep and forced her down into a neighbor's basement.
How scared were you?
We were very scared. My heart was beating very fast. We thought we would die there. The Russians fired indiscriminately.
The fighting only eased when Russia withdrew from the entire Kyiv region. Valentina emerging from the basement to find shell casings in her garden and whatever else the Russians left behind. For nearly 2 months after the fighting, residents stayed away. A trickle have now started to return. For them, Russia's lasting effects here more than just bullet holes and bomb craters.
Not only do people who are trying to rebuild so often have to start from scratch, but there remain so many mines and pieces of unexploded ordnance that authorities are actually considering closing down this town for a few days until they can clear it. It's open for now, though, which meant Valentina Mahornos could come back home for the first time in weeks. The weather was nice, so her niece and nephew played on the swing. Different than the last time they were here, when they hid in a basement, as bombs destroyed everything above. Is it difficult to think about that?
I don't even know what to say.
What we can say is that this tiny town has turned into a symbol of sorts, a village mercilessly attacked that, in the end, stood its ground, a microcosm, perhaps, of the country in which it lies. Matt Rivers, Moshun, Ukraine.
Such sad stories out of Ukraine. Despite a slight decrease last month, gas prices in the U.S. are on the rise again. According to GasBuddy.com, the national average for a gallon is at $4.20. That's a 14-cent increase compared to a few weeks ago when the average was at $4.06. New Yorkers are seeing an increase too. A gallon of gas in the city now averages at $4.42. Between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's stringent COVID restrictions, experts believe global supply chain issues will get even worse. According to a study conducted by the Royal Bank of Canada, already 1/5 of the global container fleet is stuck in congestion right now at major ports around the world. It's especially bad in China, where shipping something from a warehouse in Shanghai to the U.S. currently takes 74 days longer than usual. A recent baby formula recall is making a supply chain shortage even worse. As Todd Mago reports, those shortages are hitting parents hard in many communities across the nation.
4-month-old Poppy Feinhardt is fresh from a nap and ready to eat. Her mother, Emma, is lucky this week. She has plenty of infant formula at her Ankeny home to prepare. But gathering this baby food was not easy.
It is stressful. I've had family members they'll go to stores to look, to try to help us find some as well.
Feinhardt and millions of mothers like her are having a hard time finding formula. Last fall, a major formula maker, Abbott Nutrition, recalled some of its products after complaints of illness and even death. In addition, supply chain issues are causing a slowdown in production. Many store shelves are empty.
So normally, this shelf is full of baby formula.
Missy Ream says the problem is a burden for low-income parents at the Bidwell Riverside Food Pantry in Des Moines South Side.
We do have some baby food, but we just don't have any formula at all to offer anyone.
Ream says they usually give out 60 to 80 formula containers a month. Last month, it was just 6.
We're not aware of how they can get a hold of formula right now. It is for sure a need in our community.
Puppy!
So now Feinhardt gets up at 4 a.m. to be the first online at the Target website to order formula. It's another challenge for a new parent.
It causes a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. You know, being a parent, it's stressful anyway. This is my first time, and I'm learning the ropes, and I never imagined I would have had to look high and low for formula.
As if being a parent wasn't stressful enough. That was Todd Mako reporting. That new mother says she has seen price gouging on Craigslist and strange substitute formulas on social media. Still to come on Current News.
And I'm happy that I can bring it back to the family.
He lost it 70 years ago. Now a Korean War veteran's prized possession has made it home to his family. Now to a story years in the making. After 7 decades, a journey across the world, a class ring belonging to a Pennsylvania veteran is home again. And as Brandon Goldner reports, it was all thanks to an Army officer who made it his mission to personally return this long-lost piece of history.
Ah, finally.
So good to meet you.
Yes, good to meet you too.
It's a meeting 70 years, 3 continents, 1 ring in the making.
It feels like Lord of the Rings, you know. I have to give it away, you know, but it's so precious.
This precious class ring belonged to Melissa Jenkins' great uncle, Joseph Sullivan, a 1946 graduate of St. James Catholic High School who fought in the Korean War.
How the ring ended up in the Netherlands is, that's something we will never know, unfortunately.
What we do know, during the war, a Dutch soldier somehow got a hold of Sullivan's class ring. He then gave it to a different Dutch soldier who shared that story a few years ago to Dutch Lieutenant Colonel Jos Groen. He made it his mission to return the ring. Using its markings as a guide, he discovered it came from Chester's St. James Catholic High. The Alumni Association posted a photo of it on Facebook, which Jenkins immediately recognized as her great-uncle's class ring.
And I'm happy that I can bring it back to the family.
Despite pledging allegiance to different flags, Lieutenant Colonel Groen says American and Dutch veterans share a close bond, especially after World War II.
You fought for our liberation, so we think we should always do something back for American veterans. So I'm very happy and honored to be here.
We very much appreciate all the time you took, all the communication, your tenacity. It means a lot to us.
The end of one ring's journey, only the beginning of a lifelong friendship.
That was Brandon Goldner reporting. Jenkins could only recall meeting her great uncle once when she was just 12 years old. She says she couldn't be more thrilled at being the one to accept the ring as her family's historian. And from returning home to finding a new one of Dorothy's dresses from The Wizard of Oz will be on the auction block later this month. The dress has been on display at the auction house in New York City all this week, but for decades it was assumed lost, only to be rediscovered by chance last year at the Catholic University of America. According to experts, the dress is worth at least $800,000. Pair that with Dorothy's ruby slippers and you could literally look like $1 million. And speaking of the Catholic University of America, officials there renamed and blessed a campus street in honor of the late Sister Thea Bowman. Washington's Cardinal Wilton Gregory led the dedication ceremony. He commented on how Sister Thea's impact is still being felt today, saying it was her evangelism that paved the path for many Black Catholics in the U.S. Sister Thea is also on the road to sainthood. Her cause for canonization was opened in 2018. She could become the United States' first Black saint. And that is Current News. I'm Michelle Powers. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.